What's up, guys? We just recently helped this brand owner scale to $400,000 in active MRR, so monthly recurring revenue. When you play with numbers like this, first of all, you don't get here by accident. And so first of all, if you're already here watching this video and you're scaling pretty high, you're just dealing with a lot of issues with churn, congratulations, all right? You're already doing really, really well. If you're not dealing with numbers like this yet and just want to scale up there with a profitable MRR offer, then this is also really important to know. And to be fair, the fact that you're on this video is very good, because if you grow without solving your problems, you are growing your problem. So might as well know this sooner than later. Okay, so there's two types of churn that you can deal with, and so the first one is actually a more common one when people run their first couple MRR offers, which is the failed payments. And then the second thing is the canceled subscriptions, actually people opting out of the business voluntarily. Okay, so I'm going to talk about failed payments first, because for a lot of people this is a bigger problem, which is actually really surprising, which obviously shouldn't be the case, because technically these people don't want to leave. But I'm going to walk you through the reality. Okay, so the first thing that you'll realize is that when you run an MRR offer in the US versus in countries like EU countries or the UK or Australia, it's different when it comes to failed payments automatically. Because in the US, you'll have extremely high take rates on an MRR offer, sometimes 100%, ideally or usually even up like 70% and above. And so what's going to happen is a lot of those people are going to filter themselves out the first month, right? Those are people that just have this amount of money on their bank accounts and then they're gone. Okay, it's just what happens. In the US, they will try to finesse you and get every single discount that they get, okay, can possibly get. In EU countries, for example, complete opposite. You'll have like take rates from 10 to 30%, right? And you can still be happy about those, because those people, there's no month one where half of those fail automatically, okay? You have to deal with these numbers in the US, because a lot of people will just try to finesse you for the discount and then just leave the business without doing anything, okay? In the EU, or for example, in other countries like the UK or markets like Australia, people are a lot more careful with what they subscribe to. However, they are a lot of them are very, 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 very competent and know what they do. And so if they do subscribe, they want to stay subscribed. And so you'll have a lot less failed payments just automatically, just before we even get into any other reasons or things that you can do to optimize, right? The second thing is your AOV is too high. And so this is a huge misconception. A lot of people think, okay, well, I'm going to treat my MRR offer the exact same way as I would treat a normal offer. The problem is, right, that at some point you'll have an AOV threshold that every normal basic credit card provider just rejects, right? And it's completely different, to be fair, on the type of customer that you attract. But let's say you're selling to, middle-aged men. That's a really good example. If you go over $100 in AOV though, it's still going to reject most of the payments, right? And so you manually have to actually reduce the amount, the quantity. They will be less happy and everything. It's just a headache, right? So when you do an MRR offer, right, it's actually you make more money sometimes with a lower AOV, a lower revenue per visitor. However, a higher, take rate on subscriptions, and this is important, a lower first month failed payments rate, right? Because the AOV is actually lower and credit cards just don't decline it. So think about this before you really start to just increase your prices like crazy. The third thing is actually an incorrect reminder. So obviously there should always be some type of system how you remind the people that they're going to get charged again, because you don't want to scam anyone. However, right, this is what I want to mention here. If your product is terrible, right, and let's say you just fulfilled something which wasn't that great, and they still have quite a lot of people just like to fulfill, for example, 5 pieces of the product, whereas each and every one of them would be a month worth of supply, and they try to charge them again next month for another 5 pieces, right? And so what happens is you remind them they're still sitting on stock. It's like kind of they ordered the stuff in bulk from you, and you're just sending them 29 days later, hey, by the way, we're going to charge you the full amount for another 5 months of supply again tomorrow, okay? Obviously, they're going to take the money off of their accounts if they can just easily cancel, and they're going to tell you, no, we don't want this. And that is another reason for failed payments. A lot of churn like this, a lot of people that are actively just taking money off or locking their card sometimes, just really thinking you're a scam because you do this. So make sure that whenever you do have an MRR offer, obviously give them the proper time frame and when they will need it again, and then have a proper system of, we're going to charge you next week, not tomorrow. Tomorrow I always feel like, okay, we're going to take your money tomorrow. Tell them, hey, next week you'll get the product again. Completely different perceived, but it's the same exact thing, okay? Number 4, backup payment methods, right? So usually what we do is within a couple of days of them subscribing, the sooner the better. You don't want to do this too soon though. We send them an email which actually notifies them to put in, just for safety purposes, a backup payment method. Ideally, you want to do this 1 or 2 days after they bought, because that's when, no one expects it to arrive yet, but they're still super hyped. They like your brand and everything. And so you kind of get them into you can't even mess stuff up within like 2 days, right? Unless you have like 2 days fulfillment, which is fantastic. You can't really mess up. And so they'll still be hopefully very positively impacted or impulse purchased by your brand. And so what's going to happen is, if you remind them within that positive range before you can mess anything up in terms of product development, then they are actually going to much more likely to actually put in a backup payment method, because they think, okay, cool, I'm going to get this next month as well. Let me actually make sure that I get it. Okay. So they're going to actually proactively try to help you out there, or help themselves out in that case, right? So it's a win-win. Then we have saved payments. So even if it does fail, you need to have a proper system of how often and when you kind of rebuild them and try to charge them again. And so usually what this looks like is, as often as possible, right? So we usually charge them like 10 times, right? Sometimes twice a day, first couple of days of not going through, then, different times, everything. Okay. So you just send them reminders after every failed payment, and you give them like so many reasons and all that kind of stuff. You just bomb them full with emails, and eventually what they'll do is they either churn out themselves, or they will actually add money into their card, change the payment method, whatever. And you can recover a lot of even US payments with this. So this is actually pretty cool. Next thing is the high risk payment processing. And so a lot of people also say, that it has nothing to do with payment processing, and that's just not true, right? Obviously, the MRR failed payments has a lot to do with what payment processor you use. And it is true that Shopify Payments sometimes has a big issue and a big difficulty in charging people automatically again. And so what you'll have to do in terms of, to fix this issue is to for example, to switch to a private processor, right? A private payment processor is someone that actively takes on high risk payments and works with high-risk accounts. So if you've been banned before, they very likely and happily work with you. So the cool thing is, these guys also take a lot of payments from your customers that seem like they're fraudulent, okay? So you will just make more money doing this, and Shopify Payments, Stripe, and Airwallex, like PayPal, all these tend to kind of side with the customer instead of you, the merchant, whereas high-risk processors, which have a lot higher fees naturally, but they will side more with you. And so if you have a very big failed payments problem, it might make sense for you to switch to another payment processor, okay? And then obviously a big reason is because you're attracting the wrong type of customer. A lot of people complain about failed payments, whereas it actually the vast amount of little money that they have in their pockets that they're getting from in the first purchase. And so if your customers basically, right, are, really just spending the last $50 on your product because you're attracting a super young audience, or because, you have a super low price and you just get the people that essentially only value a cheap offer. And so the lowest quality customers, obviously those are more likely to not go through. Same thing with a back-end MRR software. And so kind of similar to the high-risk payment processing, it's really important and relevant which software you use, right? A lot of people just use the cheapest, right? Seal subscriptions can be really good. It can be really tricky as well. I recommend Loop. I recommend Recharge. These are a little bit more expensive, but they're definitely worth it, okay? And then, the second category of churn is the canceled subscriptions. And so these are people that actually opt out of the business. This is something that you can massively, and this is something pretty much only your fault. So if this is high, then be aware that this is your fault, right? So and that's not a bad thing, because we can then fix it, right? Where the fault is at, that's where the power is at. So if it's your fault, you have the power to fix it, which is a good thing. So first thing, product development, okay? So even if you just reach out with surveys, okay, what they'll feel like is they'll feel more seen, okay? They have an opinion in the brand. They have an impact, right? You actually want to work on them. You work too, not just them. And so they will a lot less churn out, even if you don't even act on the survey, but you should, right? And especially if you should and actually do apply the things very quickly that they actually complain about, what you'll find is a lot of people be very loyal to your brand, even months after you fixing one issue, right? So you build a huge, very loyal customer base, which is crucial in the beginning of a business, okay? So then we have the reach outs, right? So you have to just manually reach out to your customers. So this is customer success management. Hire someone for this to do this for you. You can get your customer support reps to essentially call them, reach out to them, make them once again feel seen, send them text messages, emails, everything. right? Then you have to have a downsell funnel. And so that means that, for example, if they're subscribed to 3 pieces of your product, then it may be if they want to opt out, right, maybe offer them 1 piece of the product, and you will see how often they actually take it, right? And then there's an even crazier method. This is like the downsell on steroids, which is you turn a downsell into an upsell. So usually this requires a phone call. So for example, if you have customer support that takes phone calls and people have to call, right? So friction, which I'll also talk about, to opt out. What's going to happen is usually you can ask them point blank, or your customer support reps can ask them point blank, hey, what was the reason why you want to quit? And so they tell you, for example, hey, I missed this and that, I want to have this other like solution and it just doesn't work without it. And then you say, hey, you know what? We actually have this in our assortment. You want to have it? Cool. Let me get you onboarded. Boom. And then you have an upsell. You literally just made more money out of that customer. And once again, if you have the right quality customer, right, this is going to work really well. Same thing for churn friction. Okay. So you have to make it a little bit difficult to opt out. Not too much, because then it's going to end in a chargeback loop and hole. And you definitely do not want that. However, if they have to get out of their comfort zone, maybe go through customer support, maybe even hop on the phone call with their customer support to churn out, you will get naturally lower churn. Okay, this is just what's going to happen. Handwritten cards, very powerful. Send them anything that you can, just write something or make it look like a handwritten card. Make them feel special. Nurture flows, which are just special emails. So in addition to reaching out and sending surveys, and then give them loyalty rewards. So make like a checklist or tier list of, okay, you've been loyal to us for this many months. You get this many free gifts. And obviously it's worth it to basically encourage everyone to reach those, right? Because those will be the happiest, most successful customers, which will also give you the best reviews, the best referrals, and so on. Pay the most amount of money. So this was pretty much it for this video, guys. I want to say thank you so much for giving me your most important asset, which is your attention. Hope to see you in the next video. I wish you a beautiful day.